So we have 3 committee members in attendance and we have a quorum. So do any committee members have any announcements or statements at the moment?
I'll have something when we talk about
That's what I said.
reviewing.
Was I
Can I
hearing
ask-
Milena?
Yeah, can I just ask, can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can hear you,
Oh,
Milena.
Okay, thank you.
So
Thank
now
you.
we
Okay.
have all 4 current committee members present. Very good. Do you have any announcements or statements, Milena?
No, I don't. Thank you.
And Madonna, no?
Later I'll have.
Okay, any from you, Anne?
No.
And none from me. Our next order of business is approval of minutes for our last meeting, which was on July 14th. Has everyone been able to read those minutes?
Yes.
And do we see any changes that need to be made?
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Well, I have just a typo. On point number 9, adjournment, it says Richard Argeiler made a motion, A. O'Dwyer seconded, and then it said my unanimous consent. I think
Okay,
Casey was so happy to get to the end of typing up minutes, so it should be by unanimous consent. So that's just a typo. Otherwise, I had nothing.
Yeah, I do have some changes.
okay,
Yeah, and that has to do with the minutes where we are talking about managing the tuition disparity of the school district.
okay,
And I think the first sentence it says, and Serna stated that the school district budget is 75% of the total town budget. I think what it should say is the school district budget accounts for 75% of the total town tax revenues. And then there's another one which is, I think that sentence continues. Those sentences are very long. It says that this is an important topic, especially in light of the upcoming decision making on the new high school. I think it should say in the upcoming vote on the new high school building. And then there are just some other more editorial things that I'm just gonna let them go. But these were kind of factual edits I had.
so Milena, your statement that you want it to state that the school district budget is 75% of the total town revenues?
Tax revenue, yeah, accounts for 75% of the total town tax revenue.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Is
And then
everyone
sorry.
any other changes? Any other changes for anyone? So Chris, how are these changes normally accounted for?
Well,
Do I contact the person who had done the minutes and give her the changes?
exactly.
Okay, then I will do that. I will send her an email. Do we?
I'll make a motion if that's okay, Rich.
Yes, please.
I'll make a motion that we approve the minutes of the Finance Committee meeting of July 14th, 2025.
With the
With the
yeah.
changes.
With
Yeah.
the discussed changes. Yes. I second. All in favor?
Aye.
Anne?
Aye.
And I say aye. Okay. Next order of business is a review of the letters of interest for the vacant Finance Committee position. And we will be sending our recommendation to the Select Board. So I reviewed both letters. I may as well begin the discussion. I was struck by Ms. Loubert's experience on the Finance Committee, and I have been impressed that as a citizen, she is so very aware of the way business gets conducted in the town, and she's comes to many meetings and deals with issues. She has good opinions and does her homework. And I think of the two who had expressed interest, I would suggest that we recommend that Michelle Loubert be our last committee member. Does anyone else have any comments?
I have a comment. I would agree with you on Michelle Loubert. She comes to the meetings. As a current member, I'm just going to read a little statement, because as a current member of the Finance Committee, I find that Mr. Wojcik's remarks in his statement was dismissive and misleading. I was not happy that the assertion that the current members, all of us here right now, are not doing their homework, quote unquote. And it is an unwarranted insult to the group, which I feel is a dedicated volunteers. We're all volunteers who bring significant financial, professional, and civic experience to our work. We take our responsibilities seriously, and our recommendations are the result of careful analysis, collaboration, and strong commitment to the fiscal health of our town. While Mr. Wojcik has an impressive medical and academic background, his submitted materials do not reflect specific experience in finance, budgeting, or municipal operations. Effective fiscal oversight requires more than just general intelligence. It demands practical experience, technical understanding, and the respect for the collaborative process. I welcome new voices and perspectives, but I think they should join the conversation with a spirit of mutual respect and not presumption. And I double your view on Michelle Loubert. I have seen her at all our meetings. She's thoughtful, she does her homework, and I would endorse Michelle Loubert. I cannot, in good conscience, endorse Mr. Wojcik.
Any other comments from the committee?
I guess this is Anne. I just do also want to speak, and I think I can't remember how many years I served with Michelle on the committee. I really appreciate having her on the committee. I agree that I think she brings a lot of thought and preparation and to the meetings and integrity, and I would look forward to having her join the committee.
And I would just echo, I think, what everyone already said. This is Milena. I think, Michelle obviously attends all of our meetings, which is not always easy. Some of them run quite late. She still works full time. So this is, just shows her civic involvement and commitment, I think, to the town. And I think she is someone who definitely would be a great addition to the committee. So I also agree that a great addition.
Well, hearing all the comments, I make a motion that we let the select board know that we submit Michelle Loubert's letter as the appropriate person to be assigned for the 5th spot in the Finance Committee.
I'll second that recommendation.
And for voting, Anne?
Aye.
Milena?
Aye.
Madonna?
Aye.
And I'm an aye. I will let the select board know of our decision. Thank you all. And the next item on our meeting is just a discussion of an annual debt service cap. I have had discussions with Chris and with Allie and Alicia, and we were discussing internal processes in the town for managing future borrowing. And I learned a lot about how the town works and how we manage all of the borrowing that the citizens at annual meeting have already approved, but we have to keep in mind how much borrowing the town can actually afford to do in each fiscal year. So it was impressive, all of the steps that administration goes through to ensure that projects are ready to go and they're sort of prioritized. And in that discussion, we talked about the possibility of trying to have a cap on the amount of borrowing we actually go out for each November. Keeping that as sort of a general rule as the town is reviewing all of the various projects, so that we don't get ourselves in a situation like we had, especially a few years back when we took out so many bonds in the same year and our debt service skyrocketed. We want to be sure, especially in these difficult times, that that doesn't happen. But I want to open the floor to Chris and Allie to sort of talk to us and maybe give an overview of how things work administratively, and if that idea of a debt cap might be a functional positive for the town.
Great, thank you, Rich. Thank you all for considering this. Rich reached out to Allie, Alicia, and I about a month ago and wanted to get a better sense of how the town manages its capital projects that are authorized at town meeting. And, you know, there are a lot of factors, as Rich alluded to, including, you know, is the project funded by debt? Is it funded by a grant or some other source like free cash, for example? Is the project ready to go? If it's a road, is it engineered? Is it permitted? What's the status of it? Essentially, you know, are there approvals needed? Is there a survey of the property needed? All of the readiness factors are they're different for every type of project or every type of purchase, but that's where we start. You know, is it ready? How much do we need? That's an internal discussion that we have, even though staff has put it forward to the boards approved it, and it's gone to town meeting. We still ask those questions before we launch any big purchase or project. The key staff at that early review stage are the department head, for example, DPW, or if it's a fire truck, the fire chief, and the town manager. That's kind of who's involved at the early stage. I should say that is guided by the discussions that the select board and finance committee have had during the budget process. It's guided by the select board's strategic planning priorities. So the more something is discussed and listed amongst those priorities, obviously there's a little bit more impetus to make it real, to get through those early design permitting stages and whatnot, and to get the project to readiness, if we can do that. We haven't borrowed it yet. We're just doing readiness at this point. If all of those things line up, and if town meeting has authorized the funds, the department head may be authorized to go ahead and move it to a contract phase for the project. It may be a contract with the engineer. If it's through engineering and it's ready for building, it may be a contract with the construction company, following obviously the appropriate bidding steps and whatnot. At this stage, the department head can hold the project back, or the town manager can hold the project back, saying either A, it's not ready, or B, despite the fact that town meeting has approved it, I don't think we can afford it right now, despite all these other factors, despite it being, you know, at this level on the priority list, we're going to hold it back. There's still an opportunity before contracts are signed to consider the project. Let me just keep going. Yeah, I see your hand. Assuming contracts are issued and the project is moving forward, the contract can begin. We still haven't borrowed the money yet. We're beginning the project and we're starting to spend money, knowing that we have the authorization, knowing that that capital line essentially can be spent into a negative because town meeting has said, yes, you are allowed to raise the funds through a bond to pay for these expenses. Once we get under contract and we start incurring expenses, we will have to bond in some way. It might be a short-term note. Usually it's a short-term note followed by a long-term note, depending on size. So those are like very preliminary steps. There's a lot of back and forth internally before a project is undertaken, before the need for bonding is incurred. So you all know, we've shared it with you in budget meetings, and it's been the subject of some discussion, that there is, the town has a certain amount of authorized debt, not yet issued, authorized, unissued. There's quite a bit. Those are projects that either aren't ready for starting, or we've decided to hold off, or maybe the project didn't get through design, or there was a significant failure in the design, or it's just not constructible, or who knows, or maybe a grant came through to offset the cost, so we didn't have to borrow. So that's what the authorized unissued represents, projects that either haven't yet started or were funded in some other way. They may yet start. We have the authorization, and if it becomes possible, if design works out, if it wasn't a priority, but now it is a priority, town staff may decide to move forward with that. When we do move forward, as I say, and we start spending, and we have to borrow in some way, that's when it impacts the debt service costs the next year. So once we borrow it, it impacts the debt service line of the operating budget in the next fiscal year. So as Rich said, a couple of years ago, the town, there were a lot of pent-up projects that hadn't been started or hadn't been borrowed for, or a combination of both. And they were done, and the next year the debt service obligations went way up. And I think both the Finance Committee and the Select Board have discussed trying to manage those increases in a better way. And I think that's what you all want to discuss tonight, is how can the Finance Committee and the Select Board, and it has to be both of you speaking with one voice, setting a budget policy for the departments and for the town manager to follow. How can you manage those increases in debt service? Because, and as I've said to you during budget meetings, debt service is one of the single biggest drivers of your operating budget. That and health insurance and other things like that. Debt service is a big driver. It's not pens and pencils in the accounting office. It's not a as expensive as copier toner is. That's not what we're talking about when we're talking about increasing taxes. Obviously, every penny counts, but debt service is really where we can make the most difference in keeping people's taxes at a reasonable level and managing increases. So a policy about how much debt service we should be looking at every year in the operating budget could help you all, it could help taxpayers, it could help your staff prioritize projects in a different way. If there was a specific cap that we had to work with, obviously that would change staff's calculation of needs and priorities, certainly. So I think it could be a really constructive discussion. And wherever you end up, you know, it should then be discussed further with the select board. Good intro. Hopefully that.
Oh, fabulous intro. You make everything sound so clear and clean.
Yeah. Well,
Ally, did you have something that you were wanting to add?
I guess the only thing that I would add is that as far as that authorized unissued amount is concerned, I've tried to be over the last few years with the budgets cognizant and asking if projects are just dead in the water to do a rescission. And that's what drives that rescission article to just basically get it off the list. So that's the only other thing I think I wanted to just bring to your attention, because you'll notice in the last few budgets, we've had the rescissions in there.
Has anyone thought, has anyone in the committee or in administration thought about what a reasonable cap might look like? I was looking over past budgets, not thinking of the last 3 years, but thinking of the budgets previous to that. And it seems to me that if we're really wanting to not let debt service get out of control, having a ceiling of something like 3 million might be a good starting place, realizing that if absolute emergencies occur, that of course things can change. But that was sort of my initial thought. Does anyone have any comments about that or any initial thoughts of their own?
your debt service, Rich, over FY21 was gonna be 1.75 million, 22 closer to 2 million, 23 2.25 million, 24 we're at about 2 million, 25 3.3 million, cranking upwards. This year, FY26 current year is 3.5.
I
But I guess I'm trying
Just to give you a level of where the debt service is.
right, but
at.
I'm trying to sort of look at the debt that the new debt that we're taking on in the town was the figure that I was looking at.
Yep, I just wanted to give you the relative position.
Right, but those are the relative service debts. Yeah, okay.
Rich, I don't know
and-
if you can see that I have my hand up.
No, I'm sorry, I cannot see that. I can only hear from you. I cannot.
Oh, no.
I only see once you get on the screen and start talking, then I can see a hand. So you need to help me a little bit.
Oh, okay. I
Whose
think,
hands are up?
you know, in the future, Rich, I might make you a co-host, because then I think you can see that, but,
Okay.
okay, so I guess I wanted to just, if you don't mind, I'd like to go back a bit. So before we even borrow, there's the authorization at the town meeting, correct? And the voters, the residents and voters of the town vote for a certain amount to borrow. I think where some of the confusion comes in, at least it did for me, and again, I'm not saying anyone was withholding information. I guess I always thought we are approving borrowing for the coming year's budget, but actually it's for whenever that borrowing will take place. So even though it's part of a year's, so we sort of vote for fiscal year, 26, that we approve borrowing of these amounts, but they may not get borrowed during those years, correct?
Correct.
Right. So then there is the actual borrowing that occurs during the year. And Rich, I appreciate you bringing up that we think about some sort of limits on how much we actually borrow in the year. A year ago, I was thinking we should put limits on how much we approve to borrow. I think we might look for some sort of and or but type statement if we set a policy, which is some sort of, there's a limit to how much we can approve in borrowing, but there's also, but it might not be how much we approve, but how much we actually borrow in a given year. Because I think, I think what happens is that we approve a lot of borrowing, and then the next year our debt service payments don't go up that much. So we think, wow, we borrowed all this amount and we're not having to pay that much more. So we get sort of complacent, I think we sort of get complacent to think, and again, I think it was fiscal year 24, so for calendar year half 23, when we had, I think, 8 million in borrowing. Does that sound right, Ally? We had a lot of borrowing. That was a big borrowing year.
It was 11 million.
11 million, even more than my memory would say. So, I also, and I have a question. Is there any time limit on the books for if we, let's say we approve a certain amount, we approved a certain amount this past May for fiscal year 26. Is there any sort of accounting or legal limit and how long that borrowing sits there approved if it's not done, or we have to take it off as unused?
I don't think there is.
Technically, no. Right now, currently, there's an old FY12. I was able to clean up a lot of these older ones and rescind a lot of them. So really the majority of the authorized unissued are 22, 23, 24, 25, and now 26. There were quite a few older ones on there. So there is no, fast and set rule as far as when you have to use it by, but that's
okay.
One of the things that I try to do is stay on top of that and say, hey, where are we at with this? Because if it's done, if it's dead in the water, or you only used half of it, let's cap it off and rescind the rest.
I mean, it does make me think that one of the things we should be talking more explicitly about during our budget season, and I'm not saying that you don't present this information and it's not available to us, but that we should know to ask the question, okay, how much of approved borrowing from the last town meeting is still yet to be borrowed? And just to help us get a sense, I also want to propose that I really would like us to move away, if at all possible, from sort of single year calculations and go to sort of running 3-year or running 5-year amounts, because I think when you set year to year to year, you don't recognize that there's fluctuations, and having these sort of running averages across 3 years or 4 years or 5 years helps to sort of balance out the sort of big year, small year, and it doesn't feel quite so chaotic. So I don't know if that's something we can do.
So the actual borrowed amount or the debt service?
But perhaps both. I mean, I don't know. I would say the borrowed amount, because debt service is harder to predict, right?
No, once it's borrowed, we know how much the loan is and how much we're going to be paying. And I'm almost certain that in section 4 of the budget book, you have a list of all of the payments.
Oh, no, we do. But I guess so, but I guess, and again, please correct me if I'm wrong. Problem is we don't really know what our interest rate's going to be before we borrow.
Right.
I mean, we know how much we vote to borrow, but we don't really know what our debt service will be until we actually borrow.
Correct. Right. And we also don't definitively know how much we need to borrow until we're back filling the deficits and we say, oh, we need to do an $11 million borrowing. That's when, so we try to be conservative and put an estimate out there. And we deal with the financial advisors as far as what they're looking at down the road, their advice for permanent and temporary borrowing interest. It's very up and down right now. So it's very difficult to try to predict that. It used to be a lot easier.
Well, that's why I guess I thought easier to think about setting limits on how much we approve to borrow than the actual debt service amount, because, I mean, you know, we have less control. I think we have, particularly right, currently, we have less control over what our interest payments are going to be. But, and Rich, I also do want to say, and I'm sorry I'm talking so long, but this is, I'm glad you brought this up, because I think you got, this is something I've brought up at various meetings. And Rich, I do see your hand is up.
I'm figuring Zoom out. I'm not an
Okay,
expert,
okay.
but may I say something?
Sure, why don't you go ahead?
I think as I've been on the finance committee the past 3 years, I noticed there was this enormous disconnect between what we thought of as the debt we are going to be facing when we're going to annual meeting. But that's only a fraction of what we're really talking about. Those are capital projects that the town has voted, yes, those are good projects to spend money on, because they're capital projects and lasting years. Yes, funding may be needed for those, but those just go in a folder. And where my focus has changed is how much we actually go out for bonding in November each year on. That's where my focus is. And that's why I had asked administration to meet and explain to me how they manage actual new borrowing, which results in new debt service. So what the town votes for at annual meeting does not create new borrowing and new debt service automatically. There are a lot of questions, as Chris said, that need to be answered. Are things ready to go? Is this a time when the town can actually afford to do this? No matter, every project the town has voted, approved, is worthy, but is it timely? Considering, is it something we need urgently? How are we ranking the various projects that could be started? So Chris or the town manager is working diligently to ask those questions. And my suggestion is just that we have a conversation with the select board about having administration sort of cap how many new projects they move forward and have to actually fund each November, so that the debt service doesn't spike each year differently, but we try and move the debt for a few years, try to pace it out so that we don't have a huge bumps and dips. Does that make more sense?
Yeah.
What my thinking was?
Makes sense to us on the staff side. Yeah, the risk that you run is everybody during the budget process and the public process says, yes, this is important, and we go to town meeting and town meeting agrees. And you want to set the town up for success, but not necessarily say, here's a blank check. Go ahead and do the projects that you can do, and we'll talk about the cost next year when we talk about debt service. So that is not the way to control costs, but talking up front about what debt service impacts should be year to year, 1 year out, 3 years out, 5 years out, is something that could really be effective at managing your operating budget increases.
I mean, it seems to me, Rich, do you, your hand is still up? Is that it?
I'm taking it down.
You want me to, oh, you did, okay. I guess, and Rich, what I wanted to say is I think it's interesting that you came up with this, having gone back and looked at borrowing in the past years, came up with about 3 million. I remember at one point I did something similar and I came up with about 4 million. So I think we're in sort of similar places in terms of amounts. But I also do want to say, if we go down this, I mean, I think we should get more on top, but I just think to be careful also that if we bring to the town an amount of borrowing for fiscal year 27, to know what remains unborrowed yet approved for fiscal year 26, 25, because that's, and I think, Chris, that is what you're speaking to, is that we don't want people thinking, oh, we're approving, 4 million this year, but actually there's still another 4 that's going to be on the same. And again, it's just that it really just jacks, I think it was
Or
fiscal year.
just because it's been approved doesn't mean we can afford it.
Right, exactly. And
Right.
it's this, well, I mean, ultimately it is, I think it's the voters who say they're willing to pay for it. I guess I don't want to override the voters. I'm a little uncomfortable about that. But to maybe sort of just say, we aren't spending it this year. That's why the debt service increase is perhaps lower than you might have expected. We can expect this to roll into next year's budget debt service increase. Because that's, I think it was for fiscal year 25, the debt service increase was almost a third of the operating budget increase, if I'm remembering. I'm sure I'm not remembering it exactly, because obviously I don't, but I think it was quite substantial. It was a huge portion of our increase in operating costs. So yeah, I think this is great.
May I say, I really do not think that talking about administratively managing the will of the voters goes against the will of the voters.
Yes, I think.
I believe that the voters are voting on the worthiness of capital projects, but they also want us to be fully aware of the effects of more capital borrowing on their tax bills each year. So I think we are having to, I see us and the select board as working with administration to try to best manage all of the things that the town wants and needs over time. I'm looking at this not as a thou shalt not exceed so and so each year, but as a guideline for trying to have a plan for managing, for holding down the amount of tax that all of our citizens are having to pay to fund all of the projects in the town. I think it might actually be helpful when we're going to town meeting to be more judicious in what we're asking and to look at the previously approved but unfunded projects to see how much do we actually need to ask for more from the voters this town meeting.
Can I just jump in? And I'm very sorry
Please.
for this very bad connection that I'm struggling with here. But I just wanted to say I was in the meeting with Rich, and big thanks to Chris and Ali and also Alicia for giving us a really excellent overview. From what I gather, I think both Anne and Rich made some very good comments tonight. And one of them is, I really feel that the timing, the cash flow management here is obviously very, very important. And thanks to Rich for raising it as an important issue. However, I also believe that we need to manage the initial decision, which is how much are we going to authorize? Because at the end of the day, that's what's going to feed what's going to get bonded at some point. And the timing issue is one issue, but there is also the underlying issue. How much are we actually going to be spending? Because if we don't manage that part, then we won't be able to manage the second part. So these things are very interrelated. I also think that, you know, a good financial or bond advisor should give us some ideas, and we should all know at this point what will happen with the interest rates. That is something that I know Anne mentioned, but, you know, we should know what is happening within the next 6 to 12 months. Anyone who's following the Federal Reserve would have a good sense for it. We don't have a control of it. So the it's gonna be what it's gonna be. Maybe there is some, you know, big dip that we may want to take into consideration, as we know that most likely there is going to be a dip in September and most likely another bigger dip later, and that should give us some incentive to maybe think about how we're going to time some of their large, very large projects, because then the financing costs may play some role here. But to me, really is, you know, when we are coming to the budget meeting, we really have to have a very clear understanding, as Rich said, of what hasn't been borrowed yet. Okay. And we have to have a conversation. And I think a lot of it will be coming from Joe is, are these things so critical, so important that they are going to be happening within the next 12 months or not? And that take that amount into the consideration when we make a decision about what we're going to authorize to be, you know, spent and borrowed in the coming budget year. I think those two need to be taken into account together. And I also think that we should at some point have what, you know, Ali alluded to, how can we have projects from 2012? I mean, that just tells you right there that either the project was not critical or there was another, you know, way of financing it. We should not have projects that are so old still sitting somewhere with, you know, potentially being bonded. I think there has to be some expiration date at some point, you know, that because otherwise we will not be able to manage this process. That definitely, whether it's 3 years, 5 years, whatever, I think at some point, if we are not borrowing, then we will not be borrowing, period. Because I don't really see how that would be, you know, possible in a normal operations. It's just not possible. So this is kind of, you know, my comments to it. But I think that both Anne and Rich raised some very good points tonight. How the policy, I really think the policy should be fairly broad.
Rich, I just want to let you know, Madonna does have her hand raised.
Yes, Madonna, did you have
Well,
some questions to raise?
Just following up on that, you're all making great points. But for Chris or, you know, is it possible that we can take these, you know, what hasn't been borrowed back to the voters for reconsideration? I mean, times change, priorities change, what we think is, you know, great today, and then all of a sudden it's not great. Is that possible? I mean, is that legal? I don't know, but if, like Milena was saying, if you have something from 2012 and it's been on the books and you're like, well, that didn't work. I mean, is that possible? That's my question.
It is, yeah. It depends on how the article at town meeting was written, and if it was very, very specific to a building or a vehicle or a very specific project, that project is either moving forward or not. If it's not, we can ask the town meeting voters to rescind it. And as Ali said earlier, we've been keeping track of that more and more over the last year or two. If the project was approved let's say it was just called street and bridge improvements. That's relatively vague. And so if there's capacity authorized 5 years ago, and we have streets to do now, we could use that old capacity most likely, and we don't have to come to you and say we need another 5 million. Because hey, there's, because superintendents changed or permitting changed or the engineering wasn't quite, all kinds of reasons why a project didn't happen then, but the authority is still there. And that's if it's vague, if it wasn't tied to a specific project, if it was just, as I say, street and bridge or just buildings, then we can go ahead and use it. If it's very specific, not needed, we'll ask for rescissions. That's been tracked a lot more carefully over the last year or two. So I think we're on top of that.
And I think
Thank-
also when I think that the ones that are hanging out for the longest are indeed those very vaguely written warrants for streets or water systems or something like that. Am I correct with that?
Some are specific. We have one from FY22 for reed cleaners. That's only happening now. So after many years of trying to assemble all of the funds, to get the grant, we had to show we had money. So we had the authorization approved, but so for a variety of reasons, something specific may not have been ready just yet. There are
But
a few more vague things in the wastewater system for equipment improvements and repairs. There are some things that are very specific that we may need to have a discussion. Are they still on the town's priority list? Does the select board want to accomplish these things or not? If they do we have the authorization? Okay, what's it going to cost us next year to borrow it? Those are the discussions that we should probably be having.
So would you say, Chris, that we should make it part of the annual review? I mean, as we are going into the budget cycle, have that conversation, taking a look at what's still outstanding that we don't even, for whatever reasons, as you mentioned,
Yeah,
and just
yeah,
really collect all the data points
yeah,
as we go into the budget cycle, because
yeah,
that seems it's important information. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Can I,
Okay.
can I ask just one other question? I just want to ask a question about the timing of borrowing. Ellie, is it the case that, because I feel like it's sort of, you do sort of a big bond issue
Mhm.
December, is that correct? Or November, December?
Yeah, typically we do a temporary borrowing, a bond anticipation note in June. And that is to cover any deficits that are in place as of June 30th. If we end the year with a deficit, because we spend before we borrow, obviously, that will hit free cash. So that's why we do the borrowing. So what we pretty much try to do is put that temporary ban out there for a 6-month maturity so that it comes due in November, December time. And that's when we'll do the permanent borrowing and assess whether or not just that amount that we borrowed temporarily needs to be borrowed, or maybe there's more. Maybe that was phase 1 and they've already started into phase 2 over the summertime. So we may have to up that. So it would be, a rolling type thing, paying off this this temporary debt, and here's new money equals the new bond amount. So we traditionally, we have the ability to roll those or make them a year a maturity, but it's been working as far as taking advantage of the interest rates and the
Yeah.
closing costs. So that's been working, bonding in November, December timeframe each year.
So how much correlation or how much similarity is there and I'm sorry, I'm not asking this well. Do you find like it doubles from June to November, December, or generally it stays the same, or there's huge variation?
It really depends on what the project is. Oftentimes with equipment, once it gets approved at town meeting, You
Right.
know, they're looking to
They go up.
try to get that going. And so the borrowing needs to happen sooner rather than later. And that's where, as I said, with the rescissions, if you have $1 million authorization and you buy a $900,000 fire truck, there's $100,000. So you borrow the 900,000 and you rescind 100, project's done and complete.
Right, okay, okay. Because part of what I think, and I guess I'll just, and I don't know if this is the case, but it's sort of a challenge that while you're all having, departmental budget discussions, we don't know yet what the borrowing is going to be in terms of its impact on the operating budget.
Yeah.
Would that be true?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Which is all the more reason to go with Rich's suggestion that we try to have some sort of management of that, or so that we can anticipate a certain amount and therefore have that in the operating budget as you're having these conversations.
Mhm.
To
But
know.
you're gonna have the November number. That's what kind of you should know going into the budget what you have. I mean, you should be able to figure it out because you're gonna borrow in November, right? That's your final borrowing, right? You know how much was authorized, so you know how much is not being, borrowed was through the bond issue.
Right.
So that we should be able to go into the budget cycle with some pretty reliable, numbers to
Oh, Melina,
guide us. Yeah.
yeah, Melina, I'm sorry. I just want to, I just want to correct if I wasn't clear. We get the actual borrowing when we sit down in late January, mid-February, whenever we start our budget. But the departments, as they're thinking about their budgets and increases, or if they need to cut more, at that point, it's co-occurring with the borrowing budget.
I
Right.
don't think I really understand like what's your concern here, Anne. Yeah.
Well, again, I'm thinking about 2025, fiscal year 25, where the increase in debt service payments were really just drove the budget increase.
Right.
And so then part of the budget season was going back, because there's nothing we can do. Once we borrow, we have to pay our debt.
Right.
A big portion of our budget season was devoted to going back to departments saying you need to cut more. And if I were a department head, I would think it'd be helpful for me to know what I'm looking at. So I'm not saying that's not so much for the finance committee and select board, except that we're the ones that have to say you have to cut more. I'm thinking about the process of departments budgeting for the coming year and having some sense. And I know it's a challenge because if you're doing it in December or late November, departments are asked to start to propose their budgets far earlier than that. So it's just a challenge, I think, that
Yeah.
we face.
Well,
Right.
it
But
would make budgeting easier across the board. If we already know debt service is going to kick the increase up to X%,
Yeah.
salaries and contracts are kicking it up by X%.
but
We're estimating insurance, then we have an idea of what we're working in. What is less predictable is how much the June short-term borrowing is. We don't know that necessarily, and it depends.
right. But at the end, you know that short term is gonna roll into your long term, so it's gonna be
Right.
part of
Yeah,
that
Ellie
number.
needs to
But
jump in.
right. But what I was thinking about, what we are discussing here, that we have to have some overall idea about what is the level of borrowing we can afford, right? And so that should be the starting point for the departments also as they are developing their budgets. Now if we end up with borrowing less, that's even better. But I think the whole idea is there has to be a ceiling or some kind of a threshold over which we should not be going unless something very very unexpected happens. And I think that goes to what we were discussing at our meeting, Chris, that there should be we should just have really kind of a long-term plan as where the budget should be. And we know that the budget is really coming from maybe two, maybe three departments. So the other departments, they do what they have to do, but they really they don't really change the number for us, right? It's just there's those three departments where it all happens, where all the spending takes place. So that's really where the focus should be. And I think we should have some idea how high we can go there. You know, what is the over what can the town handle? And we know we have a fairly, I would imagine, static new growth in terms of, you know, there's nothing big happening until something really big happens. But we can manage that. We know what is the revenue side of it, and we from there we can come up with what should be the expense side of it, so that it all makes sense to everyone who lives in this town. So I really think it's a budgeting process that's totally, seems to me, is what budgeting, every budgeting process is about. You're just kind of, you know, taking those two pieces together, and you're trying to reach, you know, some kind of a momentum that will work. And so I think, and then on the salary side, you know what it is, because you know what is going to happen there, right? So I think we should have the big pieces well defined, and going into the budget process. I really, I'm not so concerned about the timing of it, because as I said, the most of the departments, they don't really have such a big impact on it. It's just really those three departments that we need to work with. Yeah.
May I just ask again about the short-term borrowing? I'm trying to completely understand exactly what we are borrowing for in the short-term borrowing. Am I correct in assuming that that's money that we, you know, contracts that we've signed, things that are going forward on capital projects that we haven't gone out for a big bond on yet? And is that where the short-term borrowing is coming from? Ally, can you speak to that?
Yeah, just if I could just back up, as far as
Okay.
when we do the budgeting process, we do know how much that November bond is and what the debt service is.
Right.
So we do know how much the principal amount is. The problem is estimating the interest amounts for both the temporary and permanent borrowings, because we are trying to estimate what that borrowing is going to be in the following November, because we'll have one interest payment due in that fiscal year.
I don't think I understand, Ali, there, because if you are issuing your bond, you know what your rate is. So
Right. So for example, in FY 25, we would
Yeah.
have done a bond in November of 24. So now we're in the budget process in January, February, March, April, that timeframe. And we don't know how much the bond is going to be for the following year. So we know the principal that's due on that and the interest that's due on that. But we're going to have another borrowing in November of 2025 that's in FY 26 that we need to kind of guesstimate
Well,
what
you will
that would be.
guesstimate. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because
But
there will
you should be pretty close. Yeah.
right. We line it up so that that's why we do it at that time of the year, so that
Hmm.
every year you have two payments, one interest and an interest in principal.
Right.
So we set it up so that there's only an interest payment that we have to try to estimate out as well. And the same thing is for the short-term borrowing. The short-term borrowing is usually after the long-term borrowing in November, any expenditures that happen from that point to June 30th. So
So you are going behind. So the cycle is behind, not ahead, correct? Oh, I
correct.
see. Okay, okay. So that's for your, I see. And that one is a trickier one. I can see that. That would
Yeah.
be, yeah, definitely. Okay. All right.
So if we're talking about a fungible cap on the
Mhm.
amount of new borrowing, permanent borrowing we're going forward on in November, does that not sort of handle the majority of the new debt service in the
Correct.
long run?
That would mean that we would take that cap, and if you make it a certain dollar amount or a range, we would obviously be conservative and go with the higher amount. And then we would try to figure out what an interest rate that's pretty conservative would be, then we'd be able to much closer estimate what the borrowing would be the next November.
But then your work that you've been doing for the months before in green lighting capital projects that will eventually be bonded, that's really that's where the tricky part is, to try to keep that sort of eventual cap in mind, but try to keep moving forward on the projects that are most vital, right? That's
Absolutely.
very tricky.
And then maybe perhaps save things like one-term purchases like equipment until later in the fiscal year. So you can get through the majority of the fiscal year and know how much you can spend. So that's the other question for you, is the borrowing cap that you're going to put on when it begins, because there's going to have to be a little bit of time in between, because the department heads that are monitoring and managing their capital haven't been under a cap. So this coming June, there wasn't a cap. So it's whatever the deficit is on June 30th has to be borrowed.
Right, and I think you will have that transition. I was going to ask you for the short-term borrowing, what would you say, I mean, percentage-wise of your long-term borrowing, what it is? Are you talking about 15%, 20% that you usually need to borrow in June?
Usually it's between, we try to keep it in the range of 2 million to 2 to 3
Oh,
tops
okay.
for the short-term borrowing. And that's kind of been what's happening. And then by the time November comes around, we have to pay that short-term off. So
Right.
that's one piece of the bond. And then any new money that's needed. And that's
Okay.
what determines, that's how it
But
got higher.
but your short term is pretty high. I mean, you say 2 to 3 million?
Yeah,
That's
this
high.
year we did, I believe the one we just did was 1.6 million that we did in this June. So we're trying
Okay.
to scale them
Coming
back.
down. Right.
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Okay, so
All right.
this is a process that we're trying to move
Mhm.
to have everybody talk through, but it's not something that can happen like, tomorrow. This is something that we're moving towards understanding that we have limited ability to bond, right?
Mhm. Correct.
So if the short-term bond is already close to what we're wanting our cap to be, that would be very, very challenging.
Right.
But that's the thing that can help all the departments try and figure out how best to manage their expectations. Is
Yes.
that
Yep.
okay?
Yep. Definitely.
And moving all these ideas forward, my thought is the next step for us as a committee is to talk to the select board and continue the conversation with them and try to get more
A little
specificity
bit
into
more.
it. Is that what other people see, or what are your thoughts?
Ellie, I find myself thinking, I'd love to put together a table and I'd be happy to do it, but with your help, how much, like, let's, take fiscal year 26, 25, 24, 23, maybe last 5 years. And how much was approved at town meeting? How much was spent? And divide that up, or how much was borrowed, sorry, how much was borrowed? And divide that up between long-term and short-term, and let's look at the picture of the relationship between what we approve and what we borrow. Is that possible? Oh, and then possibly also our debt service payments. And again, everything's going to be, so there'll be some trailing indicators, if there's delays, but is that something we could do so that we see the last 5 years of history on this, or even the last 10 years? Or am I not envisioning what data is available to us?
I think
No,
we should
all of that is.
go for at least 10 years, because if you really want to see the trend,
Yeah.
as opposed to see some, you don't want to see the hiccups, you want to see the trend. I would say we can get the data for 10 years. That would be that would be super helpful, definitely. Yeah.
I do keep a very large spreadsheet with all that information on it. with all the bonds, all the years of expenditures. So maybe if at some point you could stop by and we
Yeah,
could take a look at that, and maybe we could manipulate what I already have to accommodate what you're looking for.
yeah. I mean, I love working with Excel spreadsheets as long as if it's a very big one, you have to be there.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. All right. I'm good. So maybe, Rich, for when we have this conversation with the select board, Ally and I will try to put that table together. Does that make some sense?
I think that's it's a wonderful, wonderful way to move forward, and perhaps it may take a couple of months for us to find time with the select board to have a meeting where we're all kind of involved. Maybe that would require some joint meeting time during their normal Monday meeting, but I will reach out to Steve and try to talk to him about how to move the conversation more realistically forward.
Presumably it'd be, sorry, Madonna, a lead up to your, every fall you set a joint
the
budget
tax.
policy. So it would be lead up to that, and then at that meeting you could discuss or set the cap, whatever we decide to do.
So Madonna has her hand up.
I just wanted to say, if Annie, if you're going to meet, with Ally, I'm wondering if that spreadsheet could also go with Milena, because she has a lot, you and she have incredibly good points about this.
Okay, yeah, that's a good idea. Milena, I'll send you like a draft and you.
Sure.
That makes sense. Yeah, okay.
Or you're welcome to both come and we
Right.
can get it all together if you'd like.
Okay, baby, that would be the easiest way to do it. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, it's just my schedule's gonna start to get pretty, so that's just the issue. Yeah, so. Okay.
So thank you all. This was a
Yeah, this was
wonderful
cool.
discussion, and thank you very much, Chris and Ally, for joining us and helping get into the weeds here and try to help with our understanding and listen to some ideas. We really, really appreciate your time and efforts on this.
Welcome to, thanks Alicia as well, who was.
Oh,
here.
well, Alicia, are you here? I'm
Yes,
not
we
seeing
need
you on the
Yeah,
list.
she's on.
Hey,
Yeah.
Okay, thank
Steve
you,
Bannon's in the
Alicia, as
audience
well.
too, so he knows you want to meet with him. Yeah.
Very good, very good. Shall we move forward to talking about our next meeting dates?
Yes, and I do want to mention that our incoming member is in the audience, and I don't know, I would assume it would be useful to have her input on dates too. Michelle, if you'd like to come on to talk about dates, please raise your hand. I don't know if, oh, there she, okay, great. So,
Michelle, normally we are normally trying to meet on the third Tuesday of each month at 6 p.m. But I found it helpful to try and discuss those next two upcoming meeting dates to see if there are too many conflicts among the committee members to use the standard meeting time and we need to make adjustments. What are your thoughts, Michelle?
6 o'clock is a good time for me, as was mentioned. Although I haven't been appointed yet. Thank you
We
for your
understand. I'm
recommendation.
just trying to sort of not have last minute problems.
It's 6 o'clock is a good time. Tuesday night is a good time because I'm usually involved at select board meetings and planning board meetings, so that usually works out well.
So I think committee members, we did discuss and approve the meeting of Tuesday, September 16th as our next meeting in September. And then in October, can I ask everyone, that would be the 21st of October. Is that a meeting that everyone can attend?
Right
I would
now,
not-
I'm fine.
I'm not able to attend that one.
You are not able to attend
No.
that one?
No.
Is there anyone else in the committee who is unavailable on the 21st of October?
Well, as I said, I'm free right now, but I'm not sure. I mean, there could be something, but right now I'm,
Maybe what would be the best is we'll look at that date again next time we meet. Since we're all good for the September meeting, we'll look at the October meeting the next time, and if we need to make some changes, we shall. And by that time, we ought to have all 5 members on the committee. Is everyone in agreement with that?
I agree.
Yes.
Yeah, that sounds,
Milena? Anne, yes?
Sure.
yeah.
Okay, great.
Eileen has a hand up. I'm just wondering if she has a procedural point for us, so I'm just gonna quickly.
Very good. Eileen, do you have a procedural point for us?
Yeah, September 16th at 5:15 is a community meeting on the proposed new school. I just thought I'd pass that along.
Well, that doesn't have.
Hold on
anything
just
to
a
do with
moment.
us necessarily.
Our meeting is set for September 16th at
Thank you.
6. And you were saying, Eileen, that conflicts with a school meeting
It's
for the
a,
town?
it's a community meeting, not just a school committee meeting. Starts at 5:15 with a tour of the high school.
So
And
I
then-
would respectfully say that she can choose which one she wants to be at.
I'm not concerned about where I go, Madonna.
Well, I'm concerned
Concern
about
is
where,
that the finance
committee.
committee members may be
Excuse me,
interested.
I'm a committee member. I'm concerned about us having a financial committee meeting.
I will say that I know that there have been previous community meetings and school tours, and I assume that there will be more. So at this point, I think that it's important for us to have a quorum, and this is our standard meeting date and time. So I'm going to assume that we're going to go forward on the 16th
Thank
at
you.
6 p.m.
Michelle did have her hand up. I don't know.
Yes, Michelle?
I just want to, Michelle LeBaire, 70 Division Street, and
Thank you.
again, thank you for your recommendation. However, as you know, I'm involved in a lot of things, and I really appreciate that the meeting is September 16th. But my past experiences on boards and committees, the community meeting regarding the new school, which is a huge impact on our taxpayers in Great Barrington, the more that finance committee members get out and among the people during these meetings, the better. So we have a more global perspective of what we're talking about, not encapsulated in a Zoom meeting. I haven't been appointed yet, but I know the meeting's been set for September 16th, but I certainly hope in the future that the committee could be a little more broad-minded as far as what else is going on in the community, because we have to know this in order to make sensible decisions when we're meeting.
Will they be taped at the high school? Will those be online for the community?
You mean recorded or online?
Recorded online so we can review it? Because I really want to stick to our third Tuesday. That is really important. And it's really hard to fit other things in. But it's not that I think that we're, shortchanging the school. I'm just in favor of keeping our third Tuesday, and perhaps if ours is recorded, then people can come and listen to our recording. I don't think it's an either or.
May I say that I have seen that there have been previous community meetings and school tours on this topic. This is not the first and only one that has or will be occurring. Am I not correct on this?
Rich, you are totally correct on it. There were a number of meetings, and I expect more meetings
And
because
I
it
expect
just yeah,
more. I
yeah,
think
yeah,
that the school
Exactly.
is doing a very good job on trying to
yeah.
get everyone to come and
Exactly.
take a tour of the school, and that's been very good. I know that I had very much intended to go to at least one previous one, and something came up. So I know that they're going to continue to do this as much as they can, the closer we get to that important vote.
Absolutely.
Yes, I think we are all in agreement on that.
Yes, and
Yeah.
that's the only reason, I mean, that's the main reason why I think we need to stick with the date and time that we currently have. If it were the one and only community meeting that was ever going to be happening with the school, I would that would have much greater weight for me. But it is not the only or the only future meeting that will ever occur regarding this and having a school tour and all of that. The community is getting a lot of time to input on this, and we certainly want to be involved in that. But I don't think that having this one conflict is going to prevent us from being involved in that important decision for the town. So right
Yeah.
now, we're going to continue on the 16th at
Yeah,
6 p.m.
But I will say, I think if it turns out I don't know if they're scheduling all their meetings for Tuesdays, and then if that's the case, we do need to deal with that because that's gonna be a lot.
Right. We will need to I will reach out to them at the school and see if that is the case.
All right.
All right. I'm sorry, my computer is giving me problems here.
I think
Now
what's,
we have citizens speak time. Are there any citizens who would like to speak? I cannot see all of
okay,
the.
I have one person who raised their hand.
Hello, James. Would you like to speak?
Yes, this is James, 84 North Plain Road. Thank you for giving me a couple of minutes to speak, and I apologize, it's going to be a little long, but one, I want to say I'm happy what I heard tonight from the Finance Committee, that you should be neutral, providing the facts of the impact of the initiatives, like the pending school November vote. It's important for the Finance Committee to provide its unbiased assessment on what the taxpayers will bear, because they don't understand. The school, Housatonic Waterworks, and the failed bridges will drive the taxes beyond affordability for many. It's forcing already economically stretched citizens to make decisions if they need to remain or not. And if they do sell, they're selling to affluent people who don't have school-age children, which exacerbates the declining school enrollment. So it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy. Then we have the Housatonic Waterworks. If we're going to buy them or not, that's going to cost millions to purchase if we take it over, and then the upgrades. And then we have the failed bridges. It's just item upon item. And I'm so happy that what I'm hearing tonight. If we say yes to everything, then our taxes are going to go up 10,000 plus for everyone. And federal grant money has dried up. I mean, that's the reality of the world we live in. They decreased or eliminated public school funding. They don't care about any blue states. Healthcare costs are going to go up, which is going to drive our senior citizens to make even more difficult decisions to pay their taxes or to get medication for their health. So I just want to summarize that your input and assessment is vital. I echo Michelle's comment. It's important for us to get out and speak to everyone. I personally, when I go to our restaurants, when I go to our stores, I speak to business owners. I ask them what's going on. They're telling me they can't hire people. We have the Elm that's closed because they couldn't get staff. The Aroma can't open up for table service. They can't have staff. We have the ICE, issue, which is driving out our workers, unfortunately. So we're getting it from all sides. Federal, our increased initiatives. We want a new school. We want this. We want that. I would love a new car. I would love a new house. But you know what? Personally, I can't afford it. So I'm not going to drive up my borrowing costs to afford a new car, a new house, because I can't. And we should make tough decisions. And I understand that people vote for things because, yes, I want a shiny new building. I want a new school. But, the school should manage its budget accordingly to its structure. They have a declining enrollment, but I'm not going to go on about the school. It's about overall all the initiatives. And I thank you and support what you're thinking. And I hope people will listen. And if they don't, they're going to listen when they open their tax bill and they're like, oh my God, now I got to sell my house. And lastly, I am thrilled and fully support Michelle's addition to the Finance Committee. She is definitely a person that we need. So thank you, and have a good night.
Thank you very much, James. Is there anyone else from citizens who would like to speak? Seeing no one, anyone from the press? So hearing no one, I will say, I believe we've concluded our meeting for today, and thank you all. I
Do
move
we
that
have to
we
have,
adjourn.
Rich, do
Yes,
we,
you have something?
do we have to have a motion to adjourn? If we
That
do,
was,
I make a motion to adjourn.
and I second that
Second.
motion.
I, all in favor, yep.
I
Aye.
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 thank you all for a very interesting meeting, and thank you very much.
Thank
See
you,
you
Rick.
in
See you in-
Thanks.
September.
Bye.